Hey there, everyone. Dave Keller here with Market Misbehavior. I'm the president and chief strategist at Sierra Alpha Research, coming to you from Redmond, Washington. Thanks so much for joining me here on my weekly show on StockCharts TV. It's a pleasure to share with you some market insights, some best practices from the world of technical analysis, but especially how to use the StockCharts platform to better understand the world around us. A lot of my work at Market Misbehavior is all built around what I call market awareness, sort of giving you the tools and the techniques, the routines that you need to have a better understanding of what's happening around you. I find a lot of times investors get into trouble. Traders get underwater when they just ignore the clear signals the market are providing back to us. And to be honest with you, I feel like a lack of awareness, a lack of understanding of market trends, and particularly when those trends change, is one of the worst violations we can make, worst penalties we can be called on in the investing world. Today, what we're going to do is talk about one of my favorite features of the StockCharts platform called ChartLists. Now, this is basically the way that the StockCharts platform, I would argue, is designed. It's designed to allow you to manage lists of charts that allow you to do all sorts of different things. What I'm going to do today is talk to you a little bit about what chart lists are, why it makes sense to organize charts based on different ideas, some of the ways that I have my own chart lists set up, and why I'm looking at certain groups of stocks and ETFs at any particular time. I'll share with you 5 tools you can use on the StockCharts platform to better understand that list of things, right? If you're trying to make sense of a list of industries or, watch list ideas, or your portfolio holdings, or a group of ETFs, and you're just trying to understand strength versus weakness, where the opportunities might be. StockCharts provides a lot of really cool opportunities to allow you to refine and filter through your list to look for particular ideas and particular actionable setups using the technical analysis toolkit. Finally, to talk about organizing your chart list. This is something I learned from mentors of mine, StockCharts mentors, who had been using the platform a lot longer than I did when I was first introduced to it a couple of years ago. And I'll share with you some of the ideas I learned from them, some of the ways that I've incorporated into my own StockCharts login to better organize how I'm making sense of the markets. For me, my investment process is all built on routines. I have a daily routine called my morning coffee routine, a weekly routine, a monthly routine, and I try to stick them as quickly or as consistently as possible, because straying from those routines is where you can get into trouble. And I do all of those routines right in StockCharts because I'm able to organize them all using chart lists. All right, so let's look at the StockCharts platform. And the way you can find chart lists, by the way, is you go to your login and go to your market dashboard, which is kind of the homepage on StockCharts. You want to click on chart lists here in the upper right. Now, I have a ton of these, and you may have a couple if you're just getting started. I found that the longer you use a platform like StockCharts, the more you have things like this that sort of build up over time. But making sure that you have them organized in a meaningful way is important. We'll get to that a little bit later. But what are chart lists? Well, I'll take one of these. This is my chart list that I use every single day, and it's actually the first thing I look at when I log into my StockCharts login every morning. I call this my morning coffee routine. Literally, you get the cup of coffee, you open up the laptop, you fire this up, and this is the set of charts that I look at. Now, I'm going to organize them just by the name, and the way that the chart lists work is it's all alphabetical, or you can sort it different ways, but it sort of defaults to the alphabetical order of the titles of your charts. So what you do is you name your charts with a number ahead of it, and then the number is basically the way that you sort it. And once you get kind of comfortable with that methodology, it is super easy to use. And if what I just said doesn't make sense, look at like Tom Bowley's content. He's one of the best, I think, at managing and organizing chart lists. Grayson Rose as well does really well with this particular area. But they both taught me different tricks and ways to organize those lists. I tend to just go with numbers, and the first chart always starts with 100, and then I kind of go from there. And the reason why I leave some space is if I want to add another chart, I can call that 105, and all of a sudden that's second on the list, and I can keep adding more and more things and reorganizing them very easily by just changing the titles of the different charts. But what I'm basically doing here is looking at the S&P 500, looking at interest rates, currencies, commodities, breadth indicators, some sentiment indicators, and then getting to sector relationships, different ratios. And this set of charts is what I look at every day. So I have it organized in a very particular order because I start at the top and I literally go through them. And the way that I actually break them down is by using this selection. Once you bring up one of your chart lists, you can go up here and say ChartList View, and that basically just gives you all the charts, whatever size you made them, in the order of the titles of each of those charts. And I literally go to this visualization and I just flick through them. I actually have a Chrome bookmark with this exact view. And this is what I run every morning as I go to that tab. And then I literally go from top to bottom and I'm making mental notes. Sometimes I'm making notes directly on the chart. Sometimes I'm jotting them down. But this is sort of the appetizer for the meal that will be my trading day, as I start with the same list of charts. So how do we kind of get this set up in the first place? Well, the quick version is, what I would suggest to you is when you go to your login and then you click on, go to your dashboard and click on chart lists. If you don't have a lot of these, make a chart list that's sort of like your morning coffee routine, and have that be the most important charts you want to make sure that you review every day, right? Something like a daily chart of the S&P 500 is probably one of those things. So all you need to do is create a chart of the S&P, and then you go to save. And then we're going to select our new chart list that we created there on the list. And so what we can then do is continue to add charts. And I think of a lot of these chart lists as working lists, right? Every time something comes up, I save it to one of those lists. And at the beginning, I just had one or two lists. And then over time, you start to think of, all right, maybe I want, with ETFs that are important to me, maybe some non-US markets, maybe commodities are really important. So I want a chart list with gold and silver and palladium and crude oil and natural gas and those kind of things. Every time you have that sort of idea, make a new chart list on your dashboard and then just start saving charts there. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's an iterative process, right? So every time you come up with something and someone mentions a chart and you bring it up and you go, oh, that's a good one to save, you save it to that list. And that's how your lists kind of get better and better over time. By the way, if you're struggling with what I've described so far, I will tell you that the Chart School part of the StockCharts platform has a lot of tutorials on how to set up your login. I would go there. The other option is when you click on Chart List, go to the very bottom, and there's this link that says Manage ChartPacks, and I have one that is free for all StockCharts users called David Keller's Morning Coffee Routine Chart Pack. If you have no idea what you're doing, start there. It'll populate your list with probably 10 or 12 chart lists, all with some of the charts that I use. That's a good starting point, and then feel free to customize them, edit them, delete them, add to them, whatever is going to make it easier. So we do have some ways, the StockCharts platform has some ways to sort of get you started. You also see things like the chart list framework, the Essentials Chart Pack. I would encourage you to explore those. When I was first setting up my login, I spent some time looking at those different free chart packs just to get a sense of what's out there. And then I started to refine those lists and say, all right, I don't need that stuff. Boy, I really need more of that. And that's how I kind of turned it into my own list of charts. All right, that's enough of sort of a, what are chart lists? Basically, it's a way to organize charts. The StockCharts platform doesn't have ticker lists, right? A lot of other platforms, you have like a watch list or a monitor with a bunch of different tickers, and then that's how it's defined. StockCharts uses all charts, right? It's all based on a list of charts. And if you want to look at a group of tickers, just save a bunch of charts onto a watch list, and that's how you can have the tickers that you can then analyze and manipulate with some of the tools I'm about to show you. So that is what chart lists are. They're super important. I would get started setting up some basic lists. But what can we do once we have a meaningful list of things available? I'm going to go down to my own chart list here, and I'll come back to kind of how I have my list organized. But I just want to give you some ideas of the power of this sort of tool. I'm going to look at the Dow stocks, and I have just a sample chart list with the Dow 30 stocks. I look at this randomly, but the Dow 30 is a manageable enough list, but has some different options, different types of stocks for us to look at, which I always kind of find it interesting to look at a little bit of variety here. So what you'll notice on this first page, this is called the summary view, and I would say once you have a list, click on this little drop down where it says View List As. I'm going to share with you 5 of these that I use all the time. There are other ones on here I don't use as much. All of them are interesting depending on what you're trying to do. So if you trade options, like that view might be interesting. If you're looking at seasonality or things like that, there could be some ways to use different parts of this. But I'll share with you the 5 that I use often. The first one is what's called the summary tab. And what this allows you to do is just at a very high level, make sense of this list of things. And here we're looking at 30 stocks, but again, they could be ETFs, indexes, whatever it is. Now, my columns may look a little different than what you see on your own login. You want to make sure on the upper left you click on columns. And these are all the different things that you can add on here. I've selected some of the items that I find super helpful. I would encourage you to, just select some if you think that those might be of interest. And then they're, as you can see, added to the list. What's great about this is all of these columns are sortable. So I'll share with you a couple things that I like to do. Number one, I always like to group things by a list of stocks by sector. Coming from an institutional background, we thought a lot about how we wanted to be positioned within the healthcare sector or within technology or within consumer discretionary. We know we needed to have some holdings in there, and we're just trying to think of what bets we were making within a particular sector. And so grouping things by sector for me is a really good starting point to just try to make sense of what is this list. So looking at the Dow 30, I can see 2 of those 30 stocks are in the communication services sector, 3 are in consumer discretionary, 5 are in financials, and you can go through all of those and then start to make comparisons within the sector, right? See which names are there and then start to draw some initial conclusions based on that initial takeaway. You can obviously sort on percent change. So if you just want to see what's moving at a particular moment, and it's going to basically take the most recent data right when you bring up the summary view, and you can always reload the tab if you want to refresh the data. You can sort by market cap, which is also a meaningful way, particularly if you have a bunch of stocks that you're less familiar with, kind of grouping it by size and noting in this case, I have 2 of the mega cap growth names, Apple and Microsoft, both over a 3 trillion market cap. There's a bit of a gap down to Walmart and JP Morgan around a 700 billion market cap. So just thinking about the largest names, the smallest names within that group, and just starting to make some assessments about how you're weighted or where your ideas are tending to focus on, right? Are there some themes that you can tease out of that list of stocks that you've been saving or whatever list you're trying to make sense of? The scooter rankings are super important in my book because it is a proprietary percentile ranking that is all based on technical analysis. It's really a momentum model. It's a simple momentum model on multiple time frames. It's mostly weighted to a long-term time frame, and then there's a medium-term time frame, and then a short-term time frame that is the least amount. But it's basically taking the large cap universe and ranking them all based on a series of technical indicators. And there's a ChartSchool article on StockCharts where they share the exact formula that they're using if you want to learn more about the what's called the scooter ranking or the StockCharts technical ranking. But I find if you're trying to take a list of things, list of stocks, and just make an initial assessment on what's what and what's working, what's not, what's strong, what's weak, the scooter ranking is a really good starting point. So by sorting the Dow 30 based on scooter ranking, I can see the top ranked stocks both in the 80s, right? So a percentile ranking from 0 to 100, 80 plus is pretty decent. Goldman Sachs and Walmart are those 2. So maybe those are some of the stronger trends that I want to make sure I focus in on. What are the weakest trends? Walgreens Boots Alliance, WBA, is one of the smallest ones. They actually might have gotten booted from the Dow now that I'm thinking of this. I don't think I've updated my Dow 30 list since WBA got kicked out of it. That note to self, I'm going to edit that one out. Dow Holdings, ticker DOW, which is in the materials sector, is around 5th percentile. Merck in the 5th, 6th percentile. So, again, with any list of stocks, it's kind of a helpful just starting point. I would not say it's an ending point. I would personally never just blindly buy a stock because the scooter ranking was above 80 or above 90, but it does help you focus in on the stronger trends, the weaker trends within a group of things. We're just winding down Q3 earnings here in late November, but I would tell you that having earnings dates as a column is super helpful. So you can sort this by upcoming earnings. And if you have a group of stocks, this is where having your portfolio as a chart list can be really valuable. Sort it based on earnings dates, and you can just make sure you're on top of those things. Again, I'm more of a medium-term, long-term investor, but I always want to know, and I would encourage you to be very aware of when companies that you own or are interested in are reporting earnings. Even if you're not laser focused on earnings, you should certainly be aware. And even if you're a pure technical trader, earnings are where big volume comes in and where a lot of movements can happen. So understanding that that's the kind of volatility you may be experiencing on a particular day, I have found super helpful. So this summary tab is kind of a starting point. Think of it as like looking at the menu for a portfolio or a watch list. I have a group of things that I've been saving, maybe ideas, maybe it's my portfolio that I enter in as a chart list. Then let me just understand and start to, go through that list and focus in on the most actionable ideas. What are the stronger trends, the weaker trends? What's reporting earnings? What are the largest stocks, the smallest stocks? What's moving today to the upside or downside? Those are some of the basic assessments we can do. And then you get a sense of what charts you should be looking at. And that's where I would kind of start with it. So that's the first way we can look at chart lists, using what's called the summary view. Now, StockCharts, the platform, and myself as a technical analyst, I'm all about charts. So for me personally, I want to get to charts as quickly as possible. So my favorite list to or link to look at is what's called the ChartList View. And what this basically does is look at the charts that you have added to your list. It does it in the order of those titles. So I haven't really added any numbers like I showed you a little earlier. So in this case, it's just sorting them alphabetically by ticker, which is fine for this example. But basically, I'm looking at my default chart, and this uses your default chart style. And if that doesn't make sense, look for the Chart School article on how to, create a default chart style. But this is basically when I bring up a ticker for the first time, it shows this chart, a 2-year or 1-year daily chart in this case, with the 50 and 200-day moving averages, the RSI, and the relative strength. And you can create a chart for this particular list and then set them up so they're all using the same chart. That's what I've done here to do a 1-year daily chart. And then all I can do is start to flick through those charts one by one, start to make notes, start to jot down tickers that are in particular phases, or whatever it is. And as you use these, you obviously can change the chart. So here you can see at some point, I actually turned the Caterpillar chart into a 2-year chart. That's fine, right? I mean, you can obviously do whatever you want. You can save annotations and do whatever's going to be most helpful to sort of, remember what you're seeing or hearing. You can see in some cases I've drawn trend lines or horizontal lines or vertical lines to remember a particular level that is meaningful to me. But for me as a technical analyst, as much as we can scan for ideas, as much as we can use things like the scanning engine on StockCharts, I find just flicking through charts is super helpful just to focus on particular patterns, right? If I'm trying to find stocks that have had interesting developments, maybe Disney with the gap higher around earnings a couple weeks ago and then continue to appreciate, maybe that's an important data point that I didn't realize until I sort of went through this chart and noticed, oh, wow, it's a gap and a run. Maybe I want to jot that ticker down or flag it in some particular way. So the ChartList View is probably what I use the most because my main goal once I get a list of charts in there is just to review them, right? To go through them pretty consistently. And I think this is a great, very quick way. And on a Mac laptop, I'm just flicking, on the touchpad to move the list up, and I can go very quickly through hundreds of charts at a time. Back in the day when I was managing a team of technical analysts at a large financial institution, this is the kind of work that we did on a number of different platforms, and the fact that you have it on StockCharts very readily available, I think is pretty powerful. So if you want to go through the charts and focus on the technical configurations and think about where the signals might be, this is the list. This is the view to use. And if you get really far down, there's this little up arrow that takes you right to the top of the list. So you can get back to sort of this launch pad thing. And also, I would say I actually have this deselected. You can have this pinned. So as you scroll through charts, it keeps that at the top, which is actually kind of helpful if you want to flip through a bunch of charts. I've just kind of gotten used to not having that, so I don't have that pinned out. All right, so that's the second way you can use the chart list is just looking at the charts. A lot of the content we do on StockCharts TV focuses on that sort of analysis. So I would say this is just an easy way to get to the charts for a list of securities. All right, the third thing is what's called CandleGlance. So what we used to do when I worked at a large financial institution, we printed out a ton of charts every day. We all had printers in our office. We killed a lot of trees by printing charts. I feel a little bad about that at this point, but that was what we did at the time. And we would print out a ton of charts. And if you wanted to look at a portfolio or a sector or a watch list, what you would do is print out all the charts in paper and then start to sort them into piles, right? Here are my good charts. Here are my bad charts. Here are my okay charts. But what you would do is start by sort of laying them all out on the table, like in a big conference room, and just start to look for, okay, this one looks like that one. Okay, this one looks very different. Maybe that's one I want to focus in on. Think of this CandleGlance view as basically doing a virtual exercise, just like what I described. It's kind of like throwing all the charts out on a big conference room table and then just starting to look at what emerges, right? What stands out to you as you're reviewing this list of charts? So looking at the Dow theory, I immediately think of, well, what are the stocks that are breaking out, right? And it's very easy to find charts like AXP, American Express, Goldman Sachs, Home Depot, JP Morgan, what else? Visa making new highs. Travelers very close. Verizon very close to making new highs. PG, Procter & Gamble breaking to a new 52-week high. Walmart in the bottom right corner. Do you see how quickly with a list of things, it's very easy to focus on the best charts? All right, what are the charts that are below 2 downward sloping moving averages, meaning they're in a confirmed downtrend? For Amgen, for Boeing, narrowly testing its 50-day moving average, but I think technically still below. Coca-Cola trying to get back above the 200-day. Walgreens, Boots Alliance, WBA, sort of below both of those moving averages. Merck certainly below 2 downward sloping moving averages. So, if I think of some basic configurations and then just look for which charts fit into those buckets, this is a great way to do what I call bucketing stocks, which is, here's a list of things. Let me focus on what's similar. Let me chart to find patterns or relationships. What types of stocks are breaking out? What types of stocks are struggling? And all of that can be done from this page. Now, your CandleGlance view may look a little different than mine. That's because up here, you can decide what you want to do. Yours might look like this, which is like a 2-month, or this, which is a 2-day chart. All of those are fine. I have a custom style that I created. And at the bottom of the CandleGlance, there's this little message that says, hey, here's how you can learn more about how to make your custom style like I did. I like a 1-year daily chart with the 50 and 200-day moving averages on there. That's what I like for my CandleGlance page. So that's how I have my login set up. You should use whatever is going to be most helpful for you. So CandleGlance is the way to look at a group of stocks or ETFs and focus on interesting opportunities based on a sort of preliminary technical evaluation. So a high-level review of the technical patterns. Fourth one, which I think is super helpful, is the performance view. This is a relatively recent addition to the StockCharts platform, and I absolutely love it. At the end of every week, I take the major indexes, I take the sector ETFs, I look at the performance table, and I sort it on 5-day performance. We get so drawn into the daily movements, right? What's up today, what's down today. But investment returns are built over time, not on one particular day, but a series of days, series of weeks, series of months, even years. So by looking at these performance tables and sorting on 1-month returns or year-to-date returns and looking at what's working and what's not, if you really want to understand a list of stocks or ETFs or mutual funds or indexes, put them in a chart list, go to the performance view, start to look at different time frames. That's where you can really understand what's happening over time. As an example, I'll switch here to the sector ETFs. I use this all the time, right? So in the last month, consumer discretionary and financials both up about 10%. Healthcare is the only one of the 11 S&P sectors actually down over the last month. Those sorts of ways of thinking about progression in the trends over time, seeing how sectors have been leading and then all of a sudden are starting to languish. Things that have been underperforming, but all of a sudden start to bubble up to the top of the list over a week, over a month. This is where you're really able to make that assessment. And again, not miss some of the best opportunities by some of the biggest movers. So that's the performance tab, which I think is a great way of making sense of a big list of anything. And finally, correlation. This is a really interesting one because, what you can do is take a list of stocks or ETFs. Up in the top, you say what you want to correlate with. So here I'm saying what are the correlations of these sector ETFs to the S&P over the last 20 days or the last month, essentially. So the SPY, obviously basically perfectly positively correlated to the S&P. That makes sense because it's tracking the same bucket. Did you know over the last month, industrials are almost perfectly tracking the S&P. Also technology, communication services, consumer discretionary, they're all about, 0.9 plus, which means they're almost perfectly positively correlated. They are the market. Healthcare is completely unrelated to the S&P 500 over the last month. And I don't mean inversely related. It doesn't mean when the S&P goes up that healthcare goes down. This means there is almost a random relationship between healthcare, between materials, between real estate, and the S&P 500. So If you feel like your entire portfolio looks the same, this can help you identify some of the things that are trading very different. And that's where you can get drawn into things like healthcare, which may be a different angle. Gold, which tends to have a very low correlation or very minimal correlation to the S&P 500. That correlation table, I find people do not really use it. They're not aware of it. I think it's a fascinating way to really understand within a list of stocks or ETFs which ones are very closely related and which ones are very not closely related. And that can help you diversify in your portfolio and make sure you're taking advantage of different opportunities the markets provide to you. So those are the 5 tools that I use to analyze my charts. Now, final point, how do you organize them? This gets back to some of my mentors, people like Greg Schnell, may he rest in peace, Tom Bowley, Grayson Rose, Gaddis Rose. They all helped me sort of, see how you could use the technical toolkit in using chart lists and how to organize them effectively. I think they all did a very good job and certainly taught me a ton about why chart lists can be such a powerful part of your routines. And I would say for me, I have these bucketed in sections. At the top, these are the chart lists that I use the most. So I actually have a chart list at the very top called random social media charts, because I'm always bringing up some random thing like Home Depot and I want to draw something and then save it out and send it out on X or on Facebook or something. This is the way to do it, right? Just make a chart list just called random social media charts. You can make annotations, save it to that list. Then you can always go back and see what you've sent and see what's happened after that. But I think that's it's kind of the starting point. For my live market recap show every trading day right after the close chart list with Dave Keller, I have a chart list that I set up for that show every day. I have a model portfolio I'm working on for my market misbehavior premium members. So I'm using a chart list to sort of put some initial ideas out there and start to think about what's working and what's not. For reports that I do every week, every month, I have chart lists because things that I'm going to go back to occasionally or regularly, I make sure I have a chart list with those things that are most important for that time frame, for that routine, and then I make sure that I cycle through and do it. I have chart lists for fund families, for index members, for themes like cannabis stocks or esports and video games or electric vehicles. The possibilities are endless. What's fantastic about the chart list feature on StockCharts is it allows you to organize the market environment, organize your most important things to watch, your most important charts to follow in a meaningful way. And I have found that the most successful investors I've worked with, it's not about analyzing a chart really well at one particular moment and getting lucky. It's about having a very consistent process of reviewing the conditions, recognizing when those conditions change. And only by looking at the same set of charts using chart lists every day, every week, every month, do I feel I'm very well equipped to navigate these markets and understand when the conditions evolve over time. What do you think about this chart list feature? Do you use it? And what is your favorite chart list that you find yourself referring to all the time? Don't forget to drop a comment below and let me know. By the way, if this sort of thinking about investor routines and decision-making is of interest, my free behavioral investing course may be a perfect option for you. Go to marketmisbehavior.com/free course to check it out. I hope it will help you think about how you think about the markets. For Market Misbehavior and Sierra Alpha Research, I'm Dave Keller. Have a great one. And remember, it's always a good time to own good charts.